Restructuring. If you listen or read the Nigerian news a lot, you must have heard this word over and over again. This debate didn't just start recently. Actually, the debate on restructuring has been going on for decades, and it has only become a lot more prominent now, especially with the increase in insecurity and the economic downturn in Nigeria. The restructuring debate is perhaps one of the most significant political discussions of our time, which tend to challenge the current governance structure in Nigeria by making an audacious call for its complete overhaul. And proponents of restructuring have also argued that this is perhaps Nigeria's best option for progress, peace, and security. If you look at most official documents from the Nigerian government, you will notice that the country is officially referred to as a federal republic. And this is where the argument on restructuring literally starts. You see, according to expert definition, a federal republic is ideally a federation of states where there is a division of governing powers between the federal government and subdivisional governments. These subdivisional governments could be regional, states, or provinces. This list shows exactly how power is shared between the federal and state governments, and it is made up of three segments. The first segment is called the enumerated powers, and these powers are granted exclusively to the federal government. In other words, the federal government can only produce policies and enforce laws within these provisions. So things like having a national military for international security, making or printing money, international trade deals, these are issues exclusively for the federal government to preside on. The second segment is the concurrent powers. These are powers that are shared by both the federal and the state governments. Both state and federal governments can make and enforce laws on these issues, but where there is a conflict, the federal law is supreme. This includes things like collecting tax, establishing courts, possession of private properties for public purposes. The third segment is the reserved powers for the state government, and they include things like conducting elections, public health, establishing local governments, public safety, meaning that they get to organize their own police, and we'll talk more about the police later. The reserve powers even allow state governments in the US to maintain a local militia, which is recognized by the law as State Defense Force. Right now in the US, only 21 states have active state defense forces, controlled exclusively by the state governments. This list more or less defines how the federal system works in the United States. And this is almost the same in other countries that run a similar federal system. Just like the United States of America, the Nigerian list is also divided into three segments: the exclusive, the concurrent, and the residual lists. And if you are to follow international practices from other federal systems, one would argue that the Nigerian list does not exactly follow the international standard of true federalism. For example, under the Nigerian exclusive list, only the federal government is responsible for establishing and running a police force for public safety, which is not the usual practice in other federal systems. This is the reason for the big controversy around the vigilante security force called Amotekun, which was set up by the southwestern states. According to the Nigerian constitution, setting up a sub-regional police-like unit is illegal. This is why this particular Amotekun security force cannot make arrests or detain criminals, as that is only reserved for the police by law. But the police force is not the only thing that is widely different from other federal systems. Issues like conducting elections, providing electricity, maintaining prisons, broadcasting, these are where you find major anomalies with the Nigerian federal system. Under other federal systems, these powers are often reserved for the state government with no influence from the federal government except when there is a conflict with the national constitution. So the argument of restructuring Nigeria is mostly moving items on this list that reflect what some people refer to as true federalism. However, moving the items on this list is not as easy as it sounds. This would take enormous legislative effort that would require amending a vast aspect of the Nigerian constitution. And great care needs to be taken to ensure that there aren't any unintended repercussions, as the items on this list are quite complex and interwoven into the very fabric of Nigeria governance system, which has been running for decades. Therefore, a swift change may have unintended and unforeseen consequences. There have been at least 3 national conferences involving political, ethnic, and religious leaders to discuss what a restructured Nigeria would look like and how best to advance a proposal that is fair and equitable for all ethnic groups in Nigeria. These conferences have produced reports with recommendations, but none of these recommendations have been considered by any government in power. The last national conference, facilitated by the Jonathan government, produced a report that is over 10,000 pages long, which President Jonathan promised to implement if re-elected into power. Unfortunately, he lost the presidential election, and the new administration has not yet looked into that report. The list is not the only issue with restructuring. There is also something people refer to as fiscal federalism, which is basically how the nation's revenue is generated and shared among the different levels of government. This is another hotly debated topic in the restructuring debate, which we will delve more in another video. The question we need to ask ourselves here is restructuring actually the best solution to Nigeria's numerous challenges as claimed by its proponents? Personally, I don't think so. Now, don't get me wrong, restructuring will address some of the issues we are facing in this country, security being one of them, because we all know that the Nigerian police force is practically incapable of handling the security issues we have in this country. But as long as we do not tackle root issues like corruption, impunity, and strengthening government institutions, restructuring would end up dividing our problems into different decentralized parts, which may even be more disastrous than the problem we had set out to solve in the first place. For example, under the Nigerian exclusive list, only the federal government is responsible for establishing and running a police force for public safety, which is not the usual practice in other federal systems. This is the reason for the big controversy around the vigilante security force called Amotekun, which was set up by the southwestern states. According to the Nigerian constitution, setting up a sub-regional police-like unit is illegal. This is why this particular Amotekun security force cannot make arrests or detain criminals, as that is only reserved for the police by law.